I'm Al Filreis.
I'm Anna Safford.
And this is ModPoMinute, actually 5 minutes.
We're hoping to scratch the surface of a short poem that we like.
So let's get started. Hi, Ariel Resnikoff. Good to see you. Fancy meeting you here in San Francisco. Jake Marmer. Hello. You came from Palo Alto, you came from Berkeley, I came from Philadelphia. We have the Bay Bridge behind us, and we're talking about a poem by Jerome Rothenberg called A Paradise of Poets. And Jake's going to read it, and then we'll talk about it for 5 minutes.
1. He takes a book down from his shelf and scribbles across a page of text, I am the final one. This means the world will end when he does. 2. In the Inferno, Dante considers a paradise of poets and calls it limbo. Foolishly, he thinks his place is elsewhere. 3. Now the time has come to write a poem about a paradise of poets.
Ariel, is this the poem that he wrote about a paradise of poets? Presumably so, because it's called A Paradise of Poets. So it's a meta poem, yeah?
I think it is, and I also think that the paradise of poets is the writing of the poem again and again. I think it's all of, this is a opening for Jerry into the paradise of poets, where he's going to continue to write. That's the omnipoetics that he talks about sometimes. That is writing as a way of, a utopic project, but it's sort of a realist utopic project.
Jake, I am the final one. I was so happy you read that, because you're the kind of poet who should be reading that line. It's so bardic, prophetic, and kind of insane, right?
It is insane. It is insane. Ariel was just referencing the final demon of I.B. Singer, which I think is right. I didn't think about that before.
Jerry knew. Rothenberg knew,
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And again, we were just talking about Adorno, and saying poetry post-Holocaust is barbaric, and Jerry Rothenberg references that line many times in many different contexts, clearly orbiting that notion, combating that notion, and just living with it. I think was a really big deal. I am the final one. I'm the final one of a certain generation. I think he is reacting to that.
Also, I mean, the reference, there's got to be a reference to Kajik in here, right? Who's Kajik?
Survivor.
It was. He just died.
Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Shimon Ratajid was his real name. And in Claude Lanzmann's film, Shoah, at the end of the film, Kajik talks about going back to the Warsaw Ghetto after the liquidation and wondering, am I the final one?
Am I the last one? There are 3 books in this poem, 3 texts. First is a book that presumably the speaker poet takes down from the shelf and writes in. Second, there is the book Dante wrote, in which he described the purgatory of paradise for poets. And third is a poem that is described in the 3rd section, which is presumably this poem. So we got 3 texts. Let's talk about the first one briefly. So a book presumably is not an empty notebook, because that's not really the kind of thing that Jerry Rothenberg would have on his shelf. He's not he's not a journal guy. So it's a book that's already written, that he's writing something on it. It's a marginalia.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't see it that way, but I guess he is reading his precursors, whether it's I.B. Singer or
And I am the final poet. I get to overwrite. I get to write on top of a text. Therefore, I get the final word, as it were.
Or I am the final one. It's just a certain feeling that one gets reading poetry of centuries previous. That like poetry meant in those centuries a whole lot more than it means now. And I feel like I'm the final one. Poetry as we know it, that the place that it took in the universe is about to end. I am the final one. This is, I still remember what it was.
And he uses the word means, which is somewhat ironic because he doesn't really quite know what this means. But this means, this gesture of overwriting someone else's book, means, Ariel, that the world will end when this particular poet who took the book down ends, dies, finishes.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think that this line, "I'm the final one," and the book that he takes off, I've heard Jerry say so many times, "I'm the last Yiddish poet," which means both I'm the last Yiddish language poet and the last Jewish poet. And I think it's a Yiddish book that he takes down and actually scrawls in English across this poem onto the Yiddish book in English.
So now we end with, "Now the time has come." That's very also prophetic language.
Yes.
Yes. So say something briefly about that. Now the time has come.
To write a poem about a paradise of poets. It almost sounds like it's Dante writing or something. And now the time has come. For who? Is he in paradise, or is the paradise of poets somebody writing? The paradise for a poet is not paradise. Like, if you have something to write poetry about, like it's like this the dark place that you're in. That is the paradise for a poet. The time has come. I have come to realization. Like, this is the paradise of poets. This awful world that I have inherited, in which I feel like I'm the final one.
This endless return. It's a very circular situation. This endless return. Final thought, Ariel.
I think this last line, since we were just a few minutes ago talking about Ceylon, is actually taken from Corona, Jerry's Rothenberg's translation of Paul Ceylon's Corona. The end is, "It is time, it was time. It is time." So it's actually, we hear Ceylon in Jerry's mouth, rattling.
A survivor
Survivor
poet.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Jake, final thought, quick.
Foolishly, he thinks his place is elsewhere. It's like this
Funny.
this clear, the irony in this rather serious poem, but you could really see it, and it's such a poetic kind of foolishness.
I'll go on.
Yeah.
That's what this is, right?
The poet's foolishness is.
He's foolish enough to think that even though he will perish, and when he perishes, the world will end because no one has anything more to say, and now he'll write a poem about that. And you can do this kind of recursion forever and survive that way. Thank you both. This was fun.
Thank you.
If you liked this episode, watch another and subscribe.
And join us for ModPo, a free and open course at modpo.org.